Welcome to LaunchLeft Podcast. I'm your host, Rain Phoenix. Today's very special guests are John Congleton, and he'll be launching Sarah Kinsley. Don't forget, rate and subscribe. Follow us on all socials at LaunchLeft. Here we go. Hi, John Congleton. Welcome to LaunchLeft Podcast. It's so great to have you.
You nailed the name.
What?
Like I said, you nailed the name.
Fantastic. Let's get right into it, shall we?
We shall. Let's
get right into it. You are a producer and a songwriter and a musician, and you've had many bands of your own. You have been doing this for a long time. How did music first find you?
How did music first find me? It found me the same way that I think it finds everyone, but I was sort of lucky in the fact that I grew up in a very musical household. My father was really entrenched in the Texas 60s psych rock scene. He was in a lot of bands there. And so there was always like really cool music in the household, music that I still dearly love today. But it wasn't my music, so to speak. And a really sort of amazing thing happened around the age of 8 to 10 for me. My parents got divorced, which actually was a great thing in some ways. But my dad sort of had a midlife crisis and started a band again. So suddenly there's people playing music inside my living room, and there were instruments around, and it was sort of like being in a band was presented as a thing that you could do as a fun hobby or whatever. And then the wonderful gift of punk rock came my way. And finally, at that point, I had music that was my own, and that's led me to basically pick up a guitar for the sole purpose of creating, to make songs of my own. I had absolutely no feelings one way or another about trying to play other people's music. It wasn't interesting to me at all.
Very cool. So it started as original music. And then how did you first have that feeling or understanding that you wanted to produce other artists? How old were you when that aha moment happened for you?
Yeah, I got very lucky in the fact that I was really young, and somewhere early on, I knew when I started making music, I knew deep down in the deepest part of my soul that I was never going to be able to make music that enough people liked to where I could make like an actual living or a robust living on that music. And I was immediately okay with that. And I felt like, no, this is going to be a hobby. This is going to be a great hobby. And I looked at it like as if I had decided that I really liked hand gliding. Nobody would expect to make a living off hand gliding, but they would probably really like to do hand gliding for the rest of their life. So I knew that. But then sort of concurrently, as that's bubbling around in my head, that I'm never going to be able to make real money as a musician or an artist, which I did end up doing that a little bit. I had the experience of recording my band for the first time, and it was a deeply profound and magical moment to walk into the control room and hear that music get played back to me. And for context, people listening should know that I am a product of the 90s. This is the early 90s when this happened to me, and this was still somewhat a borderline miraculous thing to get to hear your music played back to you. I realize now everybody has Pro Tools or GarageBand in their dorm room, and they can write and record their own music and hear it back instantaneously. But this was still a very special thing. Anyways, everything sort of snapped into focus. It was a Zen moment, as they say, where I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a vector for documenting historical performances and moments and artistic ideas.
How old were you?
14 or 15.
Wow. Okay. So super young.
15, I guess. Yeah.
Wow. And that was kind of handed to you, who had a fortunate offering from the universe. This is what you will do. And you had this resonance of this is what I will do. And it all came together. And that moment, so rare and so important. Do you feel like artists are, creatives, as you know, we all are in our own respects, but do you feel that that's sort of ordained because you are special, or that we're kind of conduits, that it comes to us because for whatever reason it turns us on and we know this is our path? You know, what are your feelings around where that kind of kismet thing happens when you know what you want to do?
I mean, I have what some people would consider a slightly demoralized feeling about this, but I truly believe that everyone is creative. I believe that being creative is as common and as simple as the act of breathing. And I think we're all born exquisitely creative creatures. And you go on throughout life still being creative in different ways, but we don't think about it as creative. You think about problem solving, you know, like, oh, what's a different way I can drive home? That is the creative act. We just sort of diminish it into these more mundane things. But I think that everyone is creative. I think just people forget that they're an artist. So I don't find being an artist to be a particularly special thing. And I think talent, I think everyone is talented. I don't think talent is rare. And I'm not particularly impressed with talent at the end of the day. Like this is, I mean, granted, I'm always around talented people, so that maybe that is part of it. But I don't particularly think that it's rare. I think being talented and being industrious and having the faith in yourself and following through, now all that is kind of rare. But you know what's really rare is like somebody who's talented and has a generous spirit in that talent. That is liquid gold. When people have the self-confidence to be open and generous, that's when you see really magical things happen.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Actually, that just kind of like stunned me. I'm speechless, which is shocking. So you've worked with incredible artists, and we keep saying the word artist. Well, I totally agree with you too. I think there's even some cultures where they do not have the word artist in the vocabulary, because that's just, everybody has a creative, you know, but some people choose to be a businessman and some painter, but they wouldn't. And I forget if somebody told me it recently, and I'm going to have to fact check and hopefully put it in somewhere in the podcast. But that there's a country that does not use, it's not in their language to have the word artist. And
I love that.
I loved that. I was like, I see that. Because there is a little bit of this whole like exaltation of artists as some sort of otherworldly, you know, above everyone else kind of, and I do think like when you are a sensitive and a conduit to the creative and you let it come through you and you're afforded the time and space and taken care of and coddled in a way to do that, you are able to speak for a lot of people. You're able to transform like massive amounts of people with your music or your writing, and that's beautiful, right? Like, but it is a lot of people involved. It's a huge collaboration of people who are being generous. And if and like you said, if you're generous as well, then that is more like what it's all about, that liquid gold of we're all here just trying to make it, like, and make it as in like, have a good life, not be alone. You know, we want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. These are basic things that are true for every human being. So if we can hold each other's hand in a cool way, whatever that means, and for whatever role we are, it's awesome. And there is a bit of that within, you know, the artists, whether it's Hollywood or entertainment or music industry, that's a little bit hand-holding to the point where it's detrimental, or it's more like...
I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously, how many biopics have been made that are basically the same story? It's because it's a boring fucking story, okay? Somebody's born, they have a certain aptitude to explain the world to us in a way that feels fresh, but that doesn't necessarily make them interesting. It doesn't necessarily make their lives interesting. I don't know why we exalt people in that way. I don't think it's terribly helpful because it just fucks people up, and it usually fucks the art up. So what's the point of that? I think that one thing you touched on where it's like there's these people that are afforded the luxury to get to be artists. It's like that's an important thing to point out. There are a lot of people that just have the deep privilege to be able to sit there and think lofty thoughts. So there's a lot of people who are fucking exquisite artists that we've never heard of because they're from somewhere where they don't have the connections to get that art out there. Probably the greatest musicians who've ever existed, we will never know about because they lived on a farm somewhere and they played music with their family when the sun went down because there wasn't electricity. And what else are you going to do? But there was no way to record it and nobody else ever heard it because they were off in the middle of nowhere. But they were just playing the music because they were expressing themselves. And that was simply enough. That was all it needed to be.
Love it. So true. I know. I mean, not so secretly, that's what I hoped and still hope at, and have had some be the case for LaunchLeft is, people bringing artists that are undiscovered completely, right, who don't have the opportunities that others do. But everything you're saying is just ringing so true to the heart space of what we like to espouse here anyway. And also just feels good to talk about the realness in art and music and not, that sort of the tropes of the industry or what you're supposed to, even like, sometimes I know, I'm like, I'm not a music historian. I'm not even into necessarily all those elements. I'm interested in what's in, like, what drives somebody to choose, of all things, to choose to produce artists or make music or make art in general. It's a tough choice. It is. It's a hard. I
mean, here's how I look at it. I mean, I think that when I was younger, I bought into the sort of tortured artist sort of mythology of like, these people are special. But now I really think of it as like a very blue collar job when you really get down to it. And the way I like to frame it, I've said this before, but the way I like to frame it is, if you wanted to know what happened in, 1935, okay, you would grab a history book and it would tell you, because historians wrote it down, or they're like, okay, so that's what happened in that year. But if you want to know what it was like to be alive in 1935, then you're going to read The Grapes of Wrath, or you're going to listen to some early jazz recordings. You're going to listen to some early blues recordings or Library of Congress. And that's how you experience what it was like to be alive. So maybe that's what we are. We're vectors for somehow communicating the ineffable feeling of what it's like to be a thing. I don't know.
I love that. That's so profound.
To me, that's like you're just chipping away on. You're like a cave painter in a way,
right?
Like that's all we have to know about cavemen. We have maybe some bones or whatever, this or that, or we have the Icemen that were frozen. But you can actually look at a cave painting and know a little bit of what it was like to be alive. Like, here's these things that we like to eat. Here's this and that, here's where we lived.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Almost like, documentarians, but the kind that would be of interest to someone from the future, or, where they actually are like, I feel what it was like.
Right. And it's not even really about information. It's about feeling.
Exactly.
It's because, a lot of that music's instrumental. It's not like somebody's telling you what their day was like.
Right. Yeah. So there are two people I noticed. I did a little perusal of your Instagram today, which I was actually kind of like thrilled to know you were on the gram. And just because
only social media I have.
Yeah, I know. I was like that too initially because I love pictures. So it was so fun. But now, it's definitely become a whole different animal. But still, it's nice to be able to follow people's what they want to show you of their life anyway. But I did notice that two people that were seemingly formative to you or important to you, or Steve Albini and Bill Riffling is someone I knew from my time with REM as well. And first of all, I'd just love to hear what it was. I think you said you worked with Steve Albini. Can you share a little bit about that experience? And
yeah, I mean, I've written a lot about Steve because he obviously disappeared from Earth a few months ago, and so he's been on my mind a lot. But yeah, basically, I was making records already. That was already sort of what I was doing, but not particularly super successful at it. And at a time when I had nothing going for me, Steve invited me to his studio in Chicago and gave me a place to live and gave me direction and believed in me in a time when there was no reason to believe me. He, for no good reason. I don't think that he saw some deep talent in me. I think he just saw me as a human who had just honest intentions of how they wanted to spend their finite amount of time on this earth. Maybe he saw a little bit of himself in me. I don't know. But he was a mentor to me from 1997 till just a few months ago when he died. And he's the most important person to me, career-wise, for sure. But certainly, and he would absolutely hate this, but he's dead. So guess what, Steve? I can say anything I want. But he was definitely like a father figure to me. And I deeply miss him. And I still can't quite get used to the fact that I live in a world where I can't email him a question. But now I've kind of pivoted to just being happy for the friendship when I had it. And maybe I can help other people out. Bill was truly one of the most talented people I've ever known. It was such a sweet, sweet man. Talk about generous spirit.
Yeah, I know. So such my very dear friend Anne, super close with him, but I knew him well because we're all in the REM camp. And
oh, cool.
So yeah, we spent some time on tour or whatever with him too. So he's just such a lovely, lovely person. I know all the good ones go early. It seems like
it does feel that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Very shortly, because Bill died maybe 4 years ago now. I remember talking to Steve Albini about Bill because they were friends. And I'll tell a very, very quick story that Bill told me. Bill was recording some band that Bill was playing with in Chicago. And this is in the early 90s. And it's when this movie called Bad Lieutenant came out. Fantastic movie. It was a real mind blower for me when it came out. It's Harvey Keitel. Have you ever seen that movie?
I think I have. It's been a long time because it's an old
very,
movie.
Very disturbing movie.
Yes,
very, very hard movie to watch, but pretty powerful piece of art. Very early 90s indie kind of film. But there's this horrible scene, just awful scene where Harvey Keitel, the lieutenant, pulls these two young girls over and he basically makes them watch as he masturbates before they can drive off. So he's sexually assaulting these young girls who are trying to get back to Jersey from Manhattan, and he's just doing this to them, and the scene stays there forever. It's so uncomfortable. Ugh. And Steve said, as they went and watched that movie at the theater together, and Steve told me that in the middle of that scene, because it goes on forever, Bill leaned over and said, "Why do they call him a bad lieutenant?" I
feel terrible for laughing, but it's great
such
humor.
A gratuitous scene.
Yeah.
And the movie's called Bad Lieutenant. It's just so fucking on the nose. Anyways, you can feel free to cut that story out, but I always thought that was a
great sense of humor. Great sense of humor.
Why do they call him Bad Lieutenant?
Okay, so I just have one more question about Steve, because he did seem to make choices that were so based in just the integrity of the person he was working with, and not ever about the money. He was absolutely Gen X, do not sell out, which, like, I'm Gen X. I remember those are my sensibilities, and it's how far we've come and how...
Oh my God.
It's just unbelievable. But like, he held out and seemed to stay true. Would you,
I would,
being his friend, would you agree? You would.
I would absolutely agree. I would say hilariously so. And he one of the only times I ever was able to catch him in a slight logic trap in a conversation we had was one of the things that Steve always resisted as a construct was intellectual property. He thought it was a completely laughable premise. He thought that the idea of being able to sort of patent an idea or trademark an idea or not trademark, like copyright music or whatever, he thought that was a dubious idea. I always disagreed with him. And the reason I disagreed with him was sort of coming from the same place as him. I always felt like it is important for an artist to be able to control their art, in my opinion. And I pointed out to him that without the idea of intellectual property, Taco Bell could use shellac songs in a commercial. It was the only time I ever made him go silent. Only time.
Well done, actually. That I could see that.
He still didn't agree with me. I think that basically what he came back with was something along the lines is like, well, okay, I would gladly let Taco Bell use a shellac song if you couldn't patent to get the fact that like the polio vaccine wasn't patented. Like that it was. I mean, I get where he's coming from.
Right.
But it's that binary thinking that I didn't think was terribly useful.
Yeah.
But Steve was an incredibly smart person, one of the smartest people I've ever known in my entire life, and he could really slice you to shreds if you didn't have your shit down tight when you wanted to argue about something.
What a cool thing that you got to spend such time with him. That's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing these stories too.
Oh yeah.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I think we're going to go ahead and bring Sarah Kinsley into this conversation. Here we go.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi, John.
Living that blimp life?
Tour has been such blimp life. How are you?
I'm great.
Are you in LA?
I am in LA.
Wow. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I literally love it here. It's so great. Anyway.
You don't sound very convincing.
I know, you don't sound very convincing.
Oh, really? I actually mean it. I wasn't being sarcastic.
No, I love Portland.
It's super sweet. Like, it's been such a blast so far to start the tour on this side of the country. So, yeah.
How's it been? How have the shows been?
They've been really, really fun. I mean, honestly, it's crazy I always forget that this is like a part of music and touring, of just like completely reimagining the songs that we made live, and they're so different and they take on totally new meaning. But yeah, it's been honestly fantastic. Like, I love the people that I tour with, really so deeply. So it's been pretty awesome so far.
Great.
Yeah. How have you been?
Same as always. Just making records.
Totally normal, boring stuff. Super boring, super normal.
Did you enjoy making this record together? Sarah, was this a cool experience for you? Now that I've spoken with John, I need to know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, honest, it was super boring. It was super, no, it was so much fun. I've been talking about it kind of nonstop about this album, just like reflecting on it. I mean, it was such a short period of time. Like, it actually still kind of blows my mind that we made it in 3 weeks and from kind of the ground up. But
wow,
it was really incredible for me. And like, I don't even know if we even kind of talked about this at the end, but it was super informative for me also, just because I'm such a perfectionist and I'm such a control freak. And it was very much like coming into a space and being way more open and kind of allowing things just to take shape very naturally, which was honestly really new for me, even though it sounds kind of simple or straightforward. But
no, I mean, it was obviously, I could tell it was a new experience for you.
Yeah, it totally was. I mean, it was also just like, we kind of talked about this too, but every single project of mine previously was just made in a closet. Like, I wouldn't talk to people for days or weeks. And I don't know, there's just like really minuscule things and details of things that you don't realize will affect you in the process of like heavily collaborating with somebody else and like being in a room for hours a day. Yeah, it was a new experience, but I loved it. It was so much fun, and I'm very proud of the record.
You played a lot of the instruments too, from what I've gathered, which is really, really awesome. I know it is. There is a bit of a derby going on out there, but I love your headphones, by the way. I don't know what those are, but I can hear you really well because of your headphones.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's a mic. Yeah.
They're like COS headphones, but it's funny that they have like the little
mic.
This thing now. Like, I feel like that's a sort of modern update, but yeah, they're actually pretty good audio quality for the price point. So I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I just like them.
Maybe you are now. Well, let's hope so.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
So you're going to be coming through LA on this tour?
Yeah, we're actually coming in like 2 days. We play San Francisco tomorrow and then 2 nights at the Troubadour.
Fantastic. And John, what was your experience working with Sarah in terms of, obviously Sarah knows what she's doing as a musician and artist. Did you play on the record? Did you guys know each other before you decided to make this record together? Or was it just like get in a room and how did it happen? Tell me everything.
I don't think I played anything. I might have done something very insignificant here or there, but for the most part, I deeply avoid playing on records that I produce if I can help it. There are instances where it's unavoidable and I have to play. For example, like if there's a part in nobody can play that instrument, I will play it. But I deeply don't like to play on records I produce because it taints my perception. The entire point of me being there is to maintain some sort of distance with things because that's what you need out of a producer is somebody who's not terribly involved. And all of a sudden, if I play something, it becomes my part or it becomes my part. And I will think of it that way because I'm a human and I'm an artistic person myself. So what I may end up doing is I may try to bury it. I may try to get rid of it, or I may try to feature it unnecessarily. Who knows? My perception will not be sound. I mean, that's my philosophy. Now, to be more specific, Sarah did play very much most of the instruments on this record. She's exquisitely talented with anything with keys, and obviously a string player herself.
Yeah, it was fun. I feel like I got home after being in your studio for 3 weeks and I looked at the synths that I had, like this old Yamaha keyboard, and I was like, God damn it. It was so sad to leave. It was so much fun, the stuff that John has in that studio. I think what we chose to play, like, I was very happy with how, I feel like we made a really intentional effort with which sounds to choose. Like, I remember having days where I feel like we spent more time scrolling through sounds almost than we did actually just refining the actual part, because once we had it, it was very natural.
Yeah.
But like that sort of pre-selection of like determining the actual landscape of how something sounds before it exists is so valuable. And I feel like it also it decides a lot about the song kind of subconsciously too. And we had a lot of conversations about like warmth and like what you actually want to get out of a synth and all the presets and all of that. But it was very cool to do that and to play a lot. It's interesting that you say that about your perspective on producing, because I think because my project has always been so insular, I'm like, I want a hand in everything, you know? But it's also very awesome to just kind of have the overarching bigger picture of like, you just see all these moving pieces and then your mind can begin to, I don't know, just place them in this sphere of sound. It's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Sarah's talking about there, just for the listener, is in my studio, for example, you can do a lot of things with MIDI, which is where you can constantly change the sound and whatnot. But for the most part, I prefer, and I own a lot of old vintage stuff, which is like just physical keyboard, do a sound, and that's the sound. And so a lot of the choices we made were those types of things, physical instruments, as opposed to recording things on MIDI, where you kind of don't have to commit to the sound so much. Because I really deeply have a distaste for that, a sort of not committing to what we're doing, like leaving decisions way down the line. That's to me, that's like a really good way to make bad music or bad recording. But instead what me and Sarah did was we talked about what we were trying to achieve. And so I would say, well, maybe this keyboard, or maybe she would have an idea about what keyboard. And then we would deliberately turn that keyboard on. And we would usually know within 5-10 minutes whether or not it was close, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, totally. I also think the beauty of that is also, especially with the kinds of synths we were playing, like the beauty of that bit of like committing is also that like you can't just replicate the sound that you finesse that quickly as you can do digitally. And so it's kind of it feels more special because it's like when you get to a sound that is close enough to what you imagine, there's no like instruction of how to get back there. There's no like undo button. So you're really like improvising in this specific moment. So many sounds on the record are just capturing like moments of time where like, I don't think even if I owned those synths, I don't know if I could get exactly back to that. And that feels very special to like capture that instead of something that you can very easily store and file away and just kind of click back to. That feels special too.
That's right. And like one of the reasons why I love gear, like physical gear, is how it's broken and how it's strange in its own little way. Like keyboards I have, just like amps and guitars, it's like you can have that exact same keyboard in another studio, in another environment. And for some reason, it just doesn't sound the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because every single one has its own strange little idiosyncratic personality. That's exactly what I love about music. And that's exactly what I love about art, is how it's broken, how it's a little bit wounded.
Yeah.
And because it's been so easy to manipulate and change things now in music, not to say that there isn't great shit happening in that way, because there is, but like we've lost that. We've lost that sort of strange quality of there's a word that I'm looking for.
No, I like the analogy of like commitment though, because it is like a sort of putting your heart into something. Like as soon as you begin making a sound, you're not going to just like be able to time travel back to where you were a few minutes ago. Like there is a real deep effort to like insert yourself in it.
Right. And like what's the worst thing that can actually happen? You decide later on you have to redo it?
The worst thing that could happen is that you lose like a very, very specific sound that you'll never get back to, which can be very tragic.
But that can make you go, is it actually worth redoing? Is that special enough to where that we actually do need to get rid of it?
Right.
These are great questions to ask in the studio that people don't ask themselves now. So easy to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. It is really, really true. I also feel like, I mean, I don't know like what generation it's specifically a part of, but I feel like the permanence of a certain sound, of like this being like, you will never get back to that, or like that is a very difficult thing for me to grasp, even. I feel like as someone who grew up surrounded by technology and the ability to track everything and record every single bit of what you do, like to the fact that we have like voice memos even as a way of like keeping demos together, it's crazy. Like that's, it's
Rain,
insane.
we're actually talking about this earlier, about this very thing, about how
really?
The very first time that I recorded, when my music was recorded, was in the early 90s. I was 14 years old. And when I heard that music back, that was the first time I had ever heard my music back to me.
Yeah.
Miraculous thing. And I had been it for a long time already at that point. And that was the first time that I heard it back. And it was exhilarating. It was terrifying. It was awful. It was, I was elated. I was everything. It was like, I cannot believe that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. And it must have been crazy too, to like hear yourself then as you got older, like on different formats, like probably hearing yourself on really good speakers for the first time, or like on a CD, or like on Spotify. It must have been so weird just to like everything compressing and expanding. Like it's crazy. There's so much bias. There's so much like judgment that's involved that we have now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. I think about this sometimes as a songwriter too, of like, have the voice memos, the recording, the instantaneous like receiving to yourself, has that kind of ruined the ability to just like go based on instinct and just move based on feeling. Because I definitely have moments where like I will sit down for hours and just like write and play, and then you'll hear the whole thing back and it sounds horrible, and it really shifts your own perception of like that meditative process of what you just went through and how it feels to you versus how you criticize it and how you want to mold it. And I don't really know. I'm always in two minds about it.
I don't think that there is an answer for that. I think that I think it's, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the technology is or what. It's just the artist who can heavily escape that terrain. Like there were equally just as bewildering problems, 50 years ago.
True.
I mean, like for example, like a lot of records that existed when records first started being made, those artists never even heard the music get played back to them while they were in the studio. Now imagine that. Like they would go into the performance room, they would get recorded, and the engineers would say, "Thank you very much." And it was going to get cut immediately to the lacquer. And then they wouldn't even fucking hear it until maybe it was played on the radio.
Yeah.
So that's wild.
Yeah. That's terrifying. It's like that's like the last experience you'd ever want to have as somebody who puts anything out into the world, is to not get any glimpse of it until like everyone around you has also heard it. God, it's so intimidating.
Is it though? Or is that just our experience of being able to sort of
maybe?
I don't know. Because like if that's the idea of getting to hear yourself played back would have been a billion times more more miraculous to them than to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it would probably be really uncanny valley. I think it would just be like, that's me. That's so crazy.
Yeah,
kind of say that like nobody, like if I was to listen to this podcast back, I would be like, God, I hate the sound of my voice.
Yeah. I feel that way. Like when our like front of house during the tours will like replay the show from last night through the PA to like test the sound. And you're like, whoa. Like, slow down.
Slow your roll.
Isn't social media kind of exactly what we're talking about, though, where you have no control? Somebody films you playing a song and you get to experience it with everybody else without any say on how it went out to the world. That's kind of what's happening now. I mean, I'm so grateful that I grew up when it wasn't happening.
Oh, me too, Rain.
I'm so happy I got to have that.
There would be some real dark shit out there. I would be so bummed. Some of the bands I was in.
Yeah.
Oh boy. We dodged a bullet.
We did. We dodged a bullet.
I think about that all the time. Hey, but anyway, so just to extrapolate on what you're saying though, but like to make it a bigger statement is like, you can't control how anybody perceives your art.
Yeah.
God, it's like we spend all this time producing a record, mixing a record, trying to get everything just the way, like Sarah, you're like sending me mixed notes of all these little things. Like, that's great. You're going to,
I know you love that part of the process so much.
But my point is then it just gets played through somebody's phone like this 5 minutes ago. Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah.
You cannot control anything about how this. So it's like, as I kind of said to Rain before you got on, it's like, it's none of our business what happens after we're done with it. It's just something else.
That was one of those like kind of philosophical conversations I feel like we had that was also very simple but blew my mind, because I was like, I don't know if it is just a generation that grew up with like this metal block constantly, And I think that like the cyclicalness of being perceived and outputting stuff, I feel like that's always been super inherent within art historically too. But I don't know. I think that I always thought that it was like, you know, there are these small bits and layers of things that somebody will grab onto and want to understand. And so my like obsession with the mixed notes or specific things totally comes from that.
Just to be clear, you weren't actually, there was nothing about your mixed notes that bothered me at all.
I was like, can we change this by 0.02 decibels?
You were absolutely fine. And I think you're totally right that yes, there will be people that notice it, but check this out. People are going to notice things that you never did intentionally. And to think that you did it intentionally.
Yeah.
At some point, Sarah, you've been cornered. Somebody's cornered you and said, this song is totally about this. And thank you.
Yeah, totally.
It's like, and you're like, that song's about my dog or whatever. You know?
Yeah, literally. It's funny when people do that. It's really funny. I know.
Anymore.
It does feel really good though. Like I will say when the album came out too, like I just felt such a relief almost just to be like, get out of me. Like it's kind of crazy because it's like, you know, the things have just been circling and like living within you for ages and ages. And like, of course it's different when you're like producing a record and it's just like you have a more sort of outwardness of like putting something together. But like that stuff I've been writing for like 2 years. So it's like, it's such a relief just to like actually feel it leave your body and like a lot of my sort of conscious thinking all the time. But yeah, social media is a weird place. I mean, I think that it's made people a lot more vocal about inner thoughts and like the way that we experience music or the right way to experience music. And I just find that like, I don't know how I would deal with it if I didn't also get to tour. Like, I'm very grateful that I have that experience of like someone coming up to you and telling you what this song actually means to them, even if it's different than my actual writing, is 100 times more valuable than like the sort of the weird tragedy of like loss of humanity that happens sometimes over social media and like trying to connect with people. So I find the two of them in tandem keep me like very sane, which is nice.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I was going to say now, you know, you're done with the record. That must feel good. But now you're getting the fun part where you get to perform it live in front of and connect with an audience and actually have that relationship, that live, there's breath in the room, you know, that feeling of like, we're all experiencing this together. So cool. That must feel good. It's also exhausting, I'm sure. And, you know, now these songs are going to be with you another 2 years in a different way.
Yeah, I hope so. No, totally. I also feel like live music specifically it's very similar to the commitment thing that we were talking about, where the musicians that I'm playing with, they're bringing a completely different read to all of this music. The sounds, my synth player plays a Prophet and this other like MIDI keyboard. All of those sounds are completely separate from like what we made on this record. So
wow,
they just take on a totally different life. And yeah, the sense of commitment of like, we're creating a bubble that is entirely new for this specific night and this specific event. That's very, very special. And I don't think anything else in music in general can kind of compare to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
a one of a kind thing. Yeah. That feeling that it's like this one of a kind moment and live. Yeah. It's wonderful. Well, congratulations on the release of your record. And I'm so glad that I got to speak with both of you and have the opportunity to hear a little bit more about it. And hopefully I'll see you one of these days on tour.
Yeah, sounds great. That'd be great.
Yeah. I was definitely getting Kate Bush vibes from some of it. I don't know if you're a fan.
Thank you.
But
I'm
a huge fan of Kate Bush. And I was...
Who is it?
Yeah, since I was a teen, it's like my, you know, probably got me into singing in many ways. But anyway.
It's surprising to me that she's like is like just had this huge resurgence. It's fantastic.
So great.
I feel like people way younger than me even are like diehard fans now. It's really awesome.
Wonderful. I know. And without effort, which is how it should be. Like she's just being herself somewhere and then boom. Oh yeah. Just had another, it's so cool. She didn't have to try. Because she just shouldn't. She's sort of like, she's such a true salt of the earth, authentic artist. I love those kind of people. So it always makes me happy when they win. Like, yay, you didn't even try and you won again. Woo! But God, I hope the rest of your tour is just slam dunk fun.
It's been really fun. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
That's very nice.
And we'll hopefully catch up with you in the future here on LaunchLeft. But thank you both for talking with me today and being a part of it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
LaunchLeft aims to create an intentional space that highlights and empowers all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice, but a necessity. LaunchLeft begins with music, but its ultimate aim is to launch left-of-center artists in all creative fields.